On this episode of Postcards.
Dakota we choha. That's the Indian way of life. That's what we want for our nation, for our kids. And you can do that through Quillwork because it's a spiritual being.
I think a person needs to stay busy, to have a purpose in life. And my artwork gives me that purpose.
This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. Live Wide Open, a regional movement that encourages people to make a great life for themselves in west central Minnesota. More at livewideopen.com. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com.
First, you take a 5-day journey on horseback. No, I'm kidding. So it's getting the rawhide, cutting the rawhide out, getting the porcupine quills, cleaning them, washing them, dyeing them to the colors that you want them, and then wrapping it. So it's a good process. It takes a lot of time, patience, and then once you do get the quills, you gotta sort them and get the right size that you want for the project. It is kind of relaxing to me when I have the time to sit down and to do it. When I was in high school is when I really was seeking out who I was as a Dakota through ceremonies. That's where I became more interested in who I was, where my people come from, what our name was, our traditional name, to learn more about the history of who we are. And then in my adulthood, just recently, 4 years ago, is when I started to seek out the arts. I always take it as this opportunity to do something that I'm not comfortable with. And then the more I live, the more I've grown to respect those teachings, and the more I try to teach those teachings. When elders shared with me stories, I share with the younger generation to my best ability. Quillworking, or quill work, is a traditional art form that the Dakota, Lakota, Nakota were pre-contact. So it was something that we used to decorate our clothes, our pipe bags, medicine. It was our beads before trading came across. So it goes back a long time.
My great-grandmother, her name was Lucy Ironboy. She had a quillwork dress, and my father, he had quillwork on his dance outfit, a grass dance outfit. And so that was the initial inspiration, was to find out how that was done, but also to locate someone in my community or other communities that I was familiar with to find out if anyone still did that. And it was unfortunate at the time in the early 70s where I didn't locate very many people that knew about the art form itself.
Now, it's becoming rare for quillwork. It's old art. It was here before we had beadwork and the traders and that on the old way. they had quill work.
In 1978, the Indian Freedom of Religion Act was passed. And prior to that, we were practicing our ways, but we were doing so more or less underground. And so people held on to traditions and customs and language, arts, and those types of things. They held on to them, but we had to do them secretively. It was a trauma issue because they were adults that had to live through the impact of the Indian Court of Offenses. And so a lot of things were kept pretty close within families and extended families, communities like that. It wasn't as open during the early 1900s and all the way up into the 50s and the 60s and 70s.
It's tough growing up in two worlds as an indigenous person of North America. Not being able to be who we are, not being able to practice all of our way of life is passed down through generations of the oppression that was put on us. So the traditional art is helping me grow, heal, to do my part to pass this on. Our people always say 7 generations. So 7 generations prayed for me, so I'd be able to do this. So I'm trying to do my best for the 7 generations after me to be able to do this art form where it's so deeply in our DNA. So that's my motivation, is somebody suffered and passed the tradition on. So I'm trying to do my best to do that.
Sometimes, especially when we had the Removal Act originating after the 1862, it was through the Removal Act that we were separated, and a lot of the people from different bands came over here up and down the eastern part of South Dakota and on up into North Dakota, on up into Canada. So there was a lot of impact from being disenfranchised from our original homelands. I think the impact was a loss of our close kinship ties. We were impacted with that loss of not being able to go a short distance and visit a relative, for instance, not being able to acquire knowledge through ceremonial activity passed on through our elders to our younger generations of people.
I was working at the casino, and Dakota Wachohan organization in Morton offered apprenticeships with a master quiller, and at the time it was supposed to be Hope TwoHearts, and she asked me if I was interested in learning how to do quill work. A split second said yes. She said, well, I'm looking for 4 students. I'd really like you to be one of my students. So I just waited, and something happened with her, so they had to replace her with Dave Louis from Siston, South Dakota. And I just kept checking on with Dakota Wachohan, did you guys select your students? Because Hope asked me, I told him. So I was throwing names out there to try to get in the program, and I was selected. So Dave did all of his own research. He went into museums and looked at the stuff that they had in their collection and taught himself, which took him 40 years to get to now, where he taught me in a 5-month period to the wrapping technique and the sew down technique. So very thankful for his research that he did and all the work he put into keeping quill work alive and passing it on. I can't thank him enough for doing that and being willing to pass it on to myself. The way I show my appreciation is teaching it, you know, what he has taught me, to pass it on, to keep it alive. You either have a choice to take the opportunity or let it go by. The opportunity, when it was presented to me, I said, why not? You know, why not try it? You know, maybe this will help me in some way. And with the past 4 years of doing quill work, it really helped me grow as a Dakota man, pursuing the traditional art form and helping me grow as an individual to know more about myself and where I come from.
My name is Georgina Drapeau. My mother is Hope TwoHearts. She is a master quiller. It wasn't until I got older that I really sat down and took the time to learn it. There was just a lot of things going on in my life. I could take that and turn it into art. She wanted her children to learn the art so it wouldn't get lost. And I feel really good to have my mom in my life to have taught me the different things about quill work and what it means to us. And I can take that and pass it on to my children. Quill work and just the form of the medicine wheel does offer a lot of protection. It means a lot to our people. When I am wearing quill work, it kind of gives that remembrance of who I am and where I come from. A lot of times growing up, there's just ugly people in the world and they make it hard, but when I come back to quill work or beadwork or anything like that, it makes me feel better about being Native American.
A lot of our Indian people of different tribes, we've come and we hit this wall. And this wall that we're hitting is really tall and it's hard to get over it. And in that, you have suicides. In that, you have poverty. In that, you have drugs and alcohol. All these things that we're trying to overcome. And so the people here in our own tribe, the people got together and they said, what are we going to do? How are we going to save our children? So overwhelming. The adults, the elders, we all got together, put our minds together and said, what can we do to save our children, to help our children, to build our nation? And what they had come across was art, spirituality, our Indian ways, this pipe way that is all wakam, that's holy. But if you can get those kids to go to sweat and to do beadwork, to do moccasins, to do earrings, to do quill work, all of that is going to help balance out all this negativity, these things that kids have. I truly believe that if they have Indian teachings in their life, they're going to have the tools. It's a beautiful way, but it's something to combat this other side that we have here, we're faced with. So all these different tools you're getting is to help the kids to better themselves and get interested in something. And if they finish something, oh my God, they have such pride. It's beautiful. So yeah, that's what we came up with, and that's what we presently be doing. And for now, it's helping our children. We're creating a healthy world. Dakota we choha, that's the Indian way of life. That's what we want for our nation, for our kids, for ourselves. And you can do that through quill work, because it's a spiritual being.
Seeing my niece working on quill work in my home is beautiful. It's something I didn't ever dream that I would be somewhat of a teacher to her of this art form. It makes me very proud that she's took the opportunity and is doing really well at keeping it alive. When you have an opportunity, take it, and being willing to give anything a shot, because there's always a plan for us. And it all comes together of who we are as Dakotas. It's the language, the arts, the ceremonies. It all helps ourselves so we can help our people.
Well, if I really had a big ego, I would say I'm a Ikchewichashta, which means a common man, but that no longer has that meaning anymore. Ikchewichashta used to mean, I'm just a common man, but people take pride and say, oh, I'm just a common man. And I always kind of laugh at that. I got started 32 years ago when I made a big change in my life. I sobered up. I sobered up, and I noticed other people who had sobered up, other Indian people had sobered up, and they kind of immediately went to being super Indian. They went to sweats. They got involved in all kinds of different ways, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just damn satisfied. I'm damn happy I'm sober, and I'll take. Maybe a year in, I noticed that I was missing something. Intuition kind of leads a person to a certain place, and I noticed that there was a spiritual aspect to my being that was missing. I decided to put away my preconceptions and look into my Dakota ways, you might say, and I decided to dance. From that endeavor came the beginning of the artwork, because I didn't have the money to buy an outfit. I mean, at that time it was a minimum of $1,000, which doesn't seem much now for a whole outfit. But at that time it was a lot, so I figured I'll make my own outfit. And surprisingly, my first beadwork was pretty good. I was really satisfied with it, in fact. And one of my early pairs of moccasins I was so proud of that I came home to show my dad. He was actually getting kind of emotional. He was on the verge of tears, because he kept rubbing the beadworks like this, and he's saying, he says, I thought this was a lost art. And so that was really a motivation to, continue. And I ended up, I had not intended to give him that, but after that, I got to give it to him. So I gave him the moccasins. When I started to make my outfits, learning to do beadwork, I went to Tandy, and I got leather, and I started making my just about tore my hands apart. But I finally got my outfit done. But that year that I danced, some guy in the powwow circuit come up to me and says, hey, geez, I like your beadwork. Well, you guys did a good job on that. I says, yeah, but geez, you look at my fingers, what I did to my fingers. And he says, you have to have Indian tan buckskin. That's just like cloth. You need to. And I said, yeah, okay. But where the hell do you get that? I thought that was something of the past. I asked my dad, I says, Dad, do you know how to make a Indian tan buckskin? He says, well, sure. I used to help my mother make buckskin. So through his explanations and help, that's how I got started. And the first hide I did, God, in some areas it was just soft, really soft. In some others it was still stiff. So I knew somehow that I was doing something right. I got part of it done. Because it turned out that, well, I kept on, and so I've been doing making buckskin for a while. A couple years after that, an adopted brother of mine came over with a powwow drum. He asked me if I could fix his broken drum. And I said, well, yeah, I could do it. And I started looking at it, and I was trying to figure out how I would be able to fix that. Jerry, I says, I think I could just probably make a new one quicker than fixing this. So there I am. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. You've never made a drum in your life, and you're saying it'd be better to make a new one. But that's how I got into making the drums, and that was years and years and years ago. And I'm making them still. Beadwork, buckskin, and drums. But that's the three things I do. Yeah, I suppose you could say I might be an artist, you know. I might be an artist. You know, there's sometimes there's no words in Dakota, so you have to use, you have to kind of like make up words. Owang washte, wokaka. So that word for art is kind of like making beauty. You know, isn't that a good description of art? Making beauty, you know, making something beautiful. There was a time when there wasn't a whole lot of pride in being a Dakota, you know. In fact, I might say that there might be some shame. I never felt that way. I've always been proud of being a Dakota, even though I didn't have nothing to do with it. But I think it gives a positive attitude about, hey, we got some beautiful stuff, you know. We have this thing called Postcards, which is an Indian corn soup, and it's really, really good. And I've been growing it since I retired because I want to make sure that goes into the next generation. And I've been teaching people how to make it because I want that to continue on. So when I come back next life, I want to be able to still enjoy Sobriety. The addiction part was a tough thing to get over with. God, when I think about it, maybe I was an alcoholic from day one. Because I got into it really, really hard. The two routes to sobriety, and I've said this a million times too, is either the judge or the doctor, you know. Somebody's got to grab you by the nose and say, hey, God damn it, change your ways. In my case, I was drinking for 5 years, and I ended up in the hospital with pancreatitis. And the doctor told me that, you know, this can kill you. This is a serious disease. It can kill you. I remembered what my mother had said to me one time. She said, Super, if you want to quit drinking, ask Wakantaka. He can do anything. Just ask him. And of course, that sounded pretty out of this world, but hell, everything else didn't work. So that day I was headed to the hospital. I know because I drank too much. I did what my mom said, and I felt kind of good right here. I felt relieved, and I made a bargain. I said, well, Kantaka, if you heal me, I don't have to go to the hospital. He says, I will quit. And I kept praying about that, going back to my Dakota ways. Praying. That was the beginning of the sobriety, man. That was tough. I'll be 32 years in April, so. I Why, hell, I wouldn't even be here. I'd have been dead a long time ago. I'd have been dead 30 years ago. So, I wouldn't have been able to express myself in art. I always like to say that the mind is very powerful. It can take you to heaven or hell. It's your choice, I was in that hell for long enough that I don't want to go back there. There's other kinds of addiction. There's addictions of looking out instead of looking in, seeing judgment instead of. I always see it's that saying that you're judgmental against things that you see in other people, and you don't in denial. You don't want to. If you keep denying things, you can't fix things. I was fortunate to have my parents. My mom lived to be 97 and my dad lived to be 95. Very fortunate to have them live that long. But when you're really old and to me, I have to, what's the purpose? I think a person needs to stay busy, to have a purpose in life, and my artwork gives me that purpose, and purpose is important. There must be some. Do I have any influence on people? That would be purpose enough. That I could have an impact on someone. Hopefully, it's the good impact.
Visit pioneer.org/postcards to catch up on missed episodes and to find out more about your favorite segments. This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. Live Wide Open, a regional movement that encourages people to make a great life for themselves in west central Minnesota. More at livewideopen.com. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com.